suddenly one day, I think Neil or somebody said, oh, Ringo's gone on holiday.
I felt two things. I felt I wasn't playing great, and the other three were really happy, and I was an outsider. And so, you know, I came to this decision, fuck it, I'm leaving. And so I went to see John, who was living in my apartment in Montague Square. I knocked on the door and I said, you know, hi, we went in. I said, I'm leaving the group because, you know, I feel like, you know, unloved and out of it, and I'm not playing well, and you three are really close. And he said, I thought it was you three. So, okay. And then I went over to Paul's and knocked on his door. I said the same thing. I said, you know, I'm leaving the band. I feel, you know, you three guys are really close and I'm out of it. And he said, I thought it was you three.
So we had to kind of reassure him that we did think he was great. I mean, you know, that's what it's like in life. You go through life, you never stop and say, hey, you know what, I think you were great. Well, I don't think we'd ever done any of that with Ringo. It'd always just been, yeah, he's great, he's good. And he felt insecure, so we had to, and he left. So we had to kind of go and sort of say, no, you're great, man, you're the best. And then he said, oh, thank you. I think he was pleased to hear that.
You know, and I knew we were just in a messed up stage, all of us. Then, you know, it wasn't just me, it was the whole thing was going down. And I came back and went in the studio, and George had it decked out with flowers. It's just flowers everywhere, and John had sent me telegrams saying, you're the best rock drummer, come on home. And I just felt good about myself again, and we'd got through that little crisis, and it was great. And then the White Album really took off, and like Year Blues, you know, the track Year Blues was great. We all left the studio and went to a little room, so there's no separation, and there was lots of group activity going down. I loved the White Album.
There was a lot more individual stuff. For the first time, I think people were accepting that it was individual. Like, I remember having 3 studios operating at the same time. You know, Paul was doing some overdubs in one, and John was doing something in another one, and I was doing horns on something else in another studio, because maybe they'd set a release date and time was running out.
Blackbird fly, she having all the ways good contacts. She making with apple and contract. Okay, I'm getting cramp. Yes, sir, that's my baby. 1, 2, 3, 4. Desmond had to borrow in the marketplace.
Yeah, ganz the money to get the steal to another, man.
If Sean Garner sounded out of tune. Dream. Come on now. It's time you little toddlers were in bed. I'm having no more messing. You've been out to the park all day, you've had a lovely time. Now it's time for bed. Are we ready? Daddy'll sing a song. Now it's time. It was me. Do that again. Are we ready? We'll sing the song. Yeah.
Come on, donkey boy.
I want to hear that, boy. I want to hear that.
You get yours, yeah. Still my guitar gently weep. All day long I'm sitting singing songs for everyone. In the stars with all the backing folk. 1, 2, 3. Who knows how long I've loved you? Yeah. Julia, Julia,
I don't want you to do it in the road.
give you everything I've got, a little piece of mind.
Thought we should have made probably a very, very good single album out of it, rather than making a double album.
Well, no, I agree. We should have put it out as 2 separate albums. The White and the Whiter album. A lot of information on a double album.
But, you know, what do you do when you've got all them songs and you want to get rid of them so you can do more songs? You know, there was a lot of you know, ego in that band, and there was a lot of songs that should have just maybe been elbowed or made into B-sides.
I think it was an album which could have been made a fantastically good album if it had been compressed a bit and condensed. But a lot of people I know think it's still the best album they made. So it's not my view, but horses for courses.
Well, you can always say that. You know, as you say, perhaps I'll go with, not definitely. I mean, in fact, I think it's a fine little album. I think the fact that it's got so much on it is one of the things that's cool about it. Because they're very varied stuff, you know, Rocky Raccoon, Piggies, Happiness of Warm Guns, that kind of stuff, you know. I think it's a fine album. You know, I'm not a great one for that. You know, maybe it was too many of that. Look, what do you mean? It was great. It's sold. It's the bloody Beatles White Album. Shut up.
There's a little trauma with a song called Revolution. I thought it was au courant, as they say, and it was about what was going on at the time. And I wanted to put it out as a single, you know. I said, let's put this out. We should say something about it, and this is what I want to say, you know. And they said, no, it's too slow.
The Apple Boutique closed down. Yeah, thinking about that one, I just don't. I think we got to the point where we didn't want it anymore.
Well, because we ended up selling the Marks and Spencer's underwear. And it's not the image we started with. We started with, you know, Simone and Marijke and all these colourful clothes and, you know, great 60s hippie gear. And then, you know, to make it pay, we ended up selling St. Michael underwear, and it wasn't the image we wanted.
We came up with the idea to give it all away and stop fucking about with psychedelic clothes shop, so we gave it all away.
Yeah, we just gave it to the people who showed up on the day, and you could have one item each, and then you mustn't take two, in the spirit of the thing. Well, they cleaned out the shop.
Only one free dress for each customer. Only one free dress for each customer.
But I think, personally, it was a good way to do it, because it showed we weren't really seriously trying to sort of be in the rag trade. It was like, look, it didn't work, so
That's it, you know. And we all went round the night before. We gave everything away, you know, and took what we felt we wanted, you know.
I didn't go there, and I had a half acquaintance I saw outside Apple. I said, where are you going? He said, oh, I'm off to the shop. I'm going to join the queue to get some of those clothes. And I thought that was awful. And I didn't want them to close the shop. And I wrote an impassioned open letter. Dear boys, you know, if you do this, and a lot of other hoo-ha. Because I dreaded to see the thing falling apart.
driving out to John's house after John and Cynthia had got divorced. And I was just going out to say hello to Cynthia and Julian. And I started coming up with these words. In my own mind, I was kind of talking to Julian. Hey, Jules, don't take it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. You know, be all right. So I kind of got the first sort of idea on the way out there with this Hey, Jules, as I thought it was going to be called. It seemed a little bit of a mouthful, so I changed it to Jude. And then I liked the song a lot, and I played it to John and Yoko when I'd finished it all. Or I actually had finished, but I thought there was a little more to go, because there was just one bit of the words, which was the movement you need is on your shoulder. And I'm playing it, and I just looked at John and said, I'll fix that. He said, what? I said, well, you know, the movement you need is on your shoulder. I've used the word shoulder once. And anyway, it's a stupid expression. It sounds like a parrot, you know. Well, I'll change that. He said, you won't, you know. He said, that's the best line in the song, you know. What? He said, I know what it means. The movement you need is on your shoulder. It's great. It's kind of... So that was the great thing about Johnny, whereas I would definitely knock that line out. He said, it's great. I could see it through his eyes and go, oh, okay. So that is the sort of line now when I do that song. That's the line when I think of John, you know. Sometimes get a little emotional during that moment, you know. The movement you need is on your shoulder. It was a problem, but we weren't. You know, that was the best thing about the Beatles. Until we started to break up, so like the White Album and stuff, then even the studio got a bit tense then.
It's evident on the White Album, you know. I think it was evident in India when George and I stayed there and Paul and Ringo left. and it was a slow death.
Going down to a divorce, you know, a divorce usually doesn't just happen, you know, there's months and years of misery.
They were going through a very revolutionary period at that time, and they were trying to think of something new. They did actually come up with a very good idea, which I thought was well worth working on. They wanted to write an album completely and rehearse it, and then perform it in front of a large audience, and for that to be a live album of new material. And we started rehearsing down in Twickenham Film Studios, and I went along with them.
I'm not sure whether everybody was behind the idea of going to Twickenham. I think what they decided to do was film whatever they were doing, and they were going to start making a new album.
The original idea was that you'd see the Beatles rehearsing, jamming, making up stuff, getting their act together, and then finally we'd perform somewhere as the big end-of-show concert kind of thing. And Michael Lindsay Hogg was going to direct it. This should totally be built like those film sets, so that you can glide all over the place on tracks and everything with your cameras. Go places that TV cameras don't go, you know. So that you can come down out of that roof on one long shot right from the back there and just come down on a thing, slowly, like a chair lift, right down, right into Ringo's face. On the one shot, you know, from right back there. That's, you know, it's like the old films. And then have all sorts of cranes and lifts and stuff for your cameras to float around us, you know. And just all that flowing movement, and then the songs, you know. And then really just stay with us. And then that'll create your sets then. You'll have cameras hanging all over the place, like... Everybody had a hard year. I feel everybody had a good time. Oh yeah, everybody had a wet dream. I thought, okay, you know, well, it's a new year and we got some new approach. But it soon became apparent that it wasn't anything new. It was just going to be painful again.
I mean, you know, the days were long and it could get boring, you know. And Twickenham just wasn't really conducive to any great atmosphere. It was just in a big barn.
I'd just spent, like, the last 6 months producing an album of this fellow, Jackie Lomax, and hanging out with Bob Dylan and the band in Woodstock and having a great time. And for me to come back into the winter of discontent with the Beatles in Twickenham was... it was very unhealthy and unhappy.
It was just dreadful, dreadful feeling. And being filmed all the time, you know, like that. I just wanted them to go away, and we'd be there at 8 in the morning, and you couldn't make music at 8 in the morning or 10 or whatever it was, in a strange place with people filming you and coloured lights.
Everybody knows we never had much privacy. And, you know, this thing that was happening was they were filming us rehearsing. There was a bit of a row going on between Paul and I. Yeah, you can see it, where he's saying, well, don't play this or something. And I'm saying, well, you know, I'll play what you want, or I won't play if you don't want it. You know, just make up your mind. That kind of stuff was going on. And they were filming and recording us having a row. You know, it was like, it was terrible, really.
But it's complicated in the bit. But no, I mean, you know.
I mean, I'll play just the chords, if you know.
I'm trying to help you, but I always hear myself annoying you, and I'm trying to. I get so annoying. But you know what I mean. I know, but you know,
because it'll take even longer.
Okay, look, I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to say that. You know, you're doing it as though I'm trying to say that. And what we said the other day, you know, I'm not trying to get you. Well, I really am trying to just say, look, lads, the band, you know, should we try it like this, you know?
It's funny that how it only occurs when the video comes out.
I know it's this one, it's like, should we play guitar all through Hey Jude? Well, I don't think we should.
Yeah, okay, well, I don't mind. I'll play, you know, whatever you want me to play. Or I won't play at all if you don't want me to play. No, whatever it is that will please you, I'll do it. I thought I'm quite capable of being relatively happy on my own, and I'm not able to be happy in this situation. You know, I'm getting out of here.
The whole pressure of it finally got to us. So instead of, you know, like people do when they're together, they start picking on each other. You know, it was like, it's because of you, you'd got the tambourine wrong that my whole life is a misery. You know, it became petty, but the manifestations were on each other because we were the only ones we had.
But it was like, no, wait a minute, George is left, and, you know, we can't have this isn't good enough, you know. So I'm not sure what happened. I think maybe Neil or one of the, you know, who looked after us would probably ring George up and say, you know, they're real sorry or whatever, it was a mistake, and it was like...
I remember being called to a meeting that was out in Elstead in Surrey. It was at Ringo's house that he bought from Peter Sellers. And it was decided that it would be better if we just got back together and finished the record. Also, you see, Twickenham studio was very cold and not a very nice atmosphere, so we decided to abandon that and go to Savile Row into the recording studio.
In the end, we recorded in the Apple Studios in Savile Row, because there was a guy called Magic Alex, which everybody knows about, who was a great friend of John's, and John thought he was the bee's knees because he used to give John little presents of electronic toys. And Magic Alex said that the EMI was no good, and he could build a studio much better. Well, he didn't.
That is Apple Electronics.
But he didn't do anything. When we finally got him to do a recording studio, we had a 16-track studio, and we walked in there, it was chaos. We had to rip it all out and start again. He had like 16 little speakers all around the room. You know, there wasn't anything he ever did, except he had like a toilet with a radio in it or something.
So we used the same portable, we just took the portable equipment in there. But the studio itself, the actual room to play in, was much nicer and much cosier and much more at home, you know.
Damn lovely, I love you.
I think everyone was getting a little tired of us by then, because we were taking a long time and there was many discussions going on by then, many heated discussions.
Billy Preston was a great help. He was a very good keyboard guy, and I mean, his work on Get Back alone justified him being there. And he was an amiable fellow too, very nice, and he was a kind of, yes, he was a kind of emollient, if you like. He helped to lubricate the friction that'd been there.
It's interesting to see how people behave nicely when you bring a guest in, because they don't really want everybody to know that they're so bitchy. And this happened back in the White Album, when I brought Eric Clapton in to play on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Suddenly everybody's on their best behavior. So I put a message out to find if Billy was in town and told him to come in to Savile Row, which he did. Straight away, it just became 100% improvement in the vibe in the room. And everybody was happier also to have somebody else playing in the band.
Working on a good track, and that always excited us. And his part was also a part of it, so, you know, suddenly, you know, when we were working on something good, the bullshit went out the window, and we got back down to doing what we did really, really well.
I think it works okay with just the two verses. Part Sweet Loretta Martin, the first verse.
Just that two for now.
Yeah. Sort of shout where it's at, where I think it should go, and then if you don't agree, remember.
Well, maybe if we had an
change.
intro, a verse, a chorus,
Yeah.
back, and then there's a bit which is like
Solo. Yeah, solo.
Jojo left his home in Tucson, Arizona, Boston, California ground.
Beatles were always a great little band. Nothing more, nothing less, you know, for all our success. When we sat down to play, we played good. From the very beginning, from when we first got Ringo into the band and before. But when we first got Ringo into the band, it really gelled. We played good. And we'd never had too many of those times where it's just not working. We had them like any other band, but often, you know, just for a great little rock and roll band, we could just play any little, you know, blues, little rock and roll things, and it seemed to work, it seemed to gel.
The wild and windy night, that could rain.
Being that originally we were gonna rehearse all these new songs and then make an album in a live show. Never really happened, because the album became us in the studio. As we rehearsed the songs, they were recorded.
you know, they were talking about doing a concert on a boat or a concert in an amphitheatre in Greece, or, you know, maybe at the Roundhouse in London. There was lots of different ideas about where they should maybe do a concert, and nothing was ever really agreed.
We ought to think out what we're going to do.
Well, I'll tell you what then, what we're doing then is we're still rehearsing and we'll get it together.
You mean you still aren't expecting us to be on the chimney with a lot of people or something like that?
Or even at the stage or the Savile or anything, yeah.
Couldn't you just...
well, anyway, so we won't worry about that. Don't give us
expecting
that
is not a word we use anymore. Thinking about.
Praying.
Hoping. Now, what about the roof tomorrow? Do you want to collectively do
No, well,
it or
let's just decide on that sort of a bit later. Let's us keep off that.
Fine.
You know, because that's
We
it.
all
We're
said
getting
to go
into too
together
diverse.
tomorrow.
Us, we'll do the numbers. You know, we're the band.
And
whatever. I'll do it if we've got to go on the roof.
You're the band, we're the crew, and never the time.
I don't want to go.
No, I know. I know.
I want to go on the roof.
I would like to go on the roof. You would like to.
So I'd like to go on the roof.
Very diverse people. One second.
But I mean,
that's all right.
I'd not
Anyway,
like
we
to
won't
if anybody
discuss
doesn't
it.
want to go on it, you know.
That's it. We won't
And
worry
I want to
about
record them as tracks if you want to record them when we go into it.
Yeah.
And I want to do it 40 numbers when you want to do it.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's
all
all...
in Africa.
all
Any time is paradise when I'm with you.
Anytime. Anytime at all.
Because that was looking for an end to the film, really. And it was one of those, well, how are we going to finish this then? There's not going to be a big concert. Because by then it was really, you know, looking like, well, you know, can we do this, finish this in 2 weeks' time? And so then it was suggested that we go up on the roof and do a concert there. Then we could all go home.
Don't let me down.
And it started to filter up from our roadie, Mal, would sort of come creep in trying to keep out the camera. He said, police are complaining, you've got to stop. We said, we're not stopping, keeping going. He said, the police, he'd come up to him and he said, police are going to arrest you. Good end to the film. Let them do it. Great, you know. And we thought, well, that's an end. You know, Beatles busted on rooftop gig, you know.
The thing on the roof that always I feel let down about were the police. You know, because someone in the neighborhood called the police and the police came up and I was playing away and I thought, oh, great. You know, I hope they drag me off. You know, I wanted the cops to drag me off, get off those drums, you know, because we were being filmed and it would have been really great. Well, they didn't, of course. They just came bumbling in. You've got to turn that sound down. You know, so could have been fabulous.
Get back, get back, get back to where you once belonged.
When we got to Let It Be, we couldn't play the game anymore. We couldn't do it anymore. It had come to a point where it was no longer creating magic, and the camera sort of being in the room with us made us aware of that it was a phony situation.
In fact, what happened was when we got in there, we showed how the breakup of a group works. We didn't realise that we were actually sort of breaking up, you know, as it was happening.
Just the same as it was before, you know, the year before, when we were last in the studio. There's a lot of kind of trivia and games that were being played.
Well, I think it shows as an absolute fact that we were going different places, you know. You know, I've mentioned it before, the energy for the Beatles was waning. You know, we put in 1,000%, and then it was dwindling now. It's like, oh dear, do we have to turn up? We have to do that thing again? I want to do this, and John wants to do that, and, you know, George was off, and, you know, people would, you know, we had families.
And I remember thinking of it like army buddies. One of the songs we used to love in the past was Wedding Bells. Those wedding bells are breaking up, that old gang of mine. And this idea that you've been army buddies, but one day you have to kiss the army goodbye and go and get married and act like normal people. It was a bit like that for the Beatles. We always knew that day had to come.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me.
And they chose Paul's wedding day to bust me on.
Really? No, because George was in my office, and Patty rang saying that Sergeant Pilcher, that was his name, right, was swarming all over the house at in Isha. And George said to me, well, what should I do? You know, what should I tell Patty over this conversation? And I said, well, have you got this stuff? They'll just tell them where it is, George, because they'll find it anyway. You know, save yourself a lot of hassles, you know. And he said, well, he had a bit of grass, maybe a bit of hash in a box on the mantelpiece, right? So he rang Patty and told her to tell him where it was, you know. By which time they'd found a chunk this big in a boot in his wardrobe.
You know, Sergeant Pilcher was gaining great notoriety of just busting pop stars, you know, besides George and Mick and Keith and John, and always was the same cop. Nobody realized, you know, nobody put two and two together.
What happened was there was the kind of social or pecking order that was in the pop world. And the drug squad decided to go around. I mean, this fella thought he was Oliver Cromwell, so he decided to go around and clean up what was going on. And they busted Donovan first. You know, anybody who was in England at that time will remember they bust Donovan, and then they bust the Rolling Stones, and they worked their way up, and then they busted John and Yoko and me.
Sergeant Pilcher's successful career with the drug squad was short-lived. He was later sent to prison for perjury. Sentencing Pilcher to 4 years in prison, Mr. Justice Melford Stevenson said this: "You poisoned the wells of criminal justice, and you set about it deliberately. What is equally bad is that you betrayed your comrades in the Metropolitan Police, a force which commands the respect of the civilized world."
Married on the cross-channel ferry. That was the romantic part, when we went to Southampton, and then we couldn't get on because she wasn't English and she couldn't get that day visa to go across, and they said, anyway, you can't get married, the captain's not allowed to do it anymore. So we were in Paris and we were calling Peter Brown and said, we want to get married, where can we go? And he called back and said, Gibraltar's the only place. So, okay, let's go. And we went there. It was beautiful.
John hooked up with Yoko so sort of intensely that was kind of obvious that there could be no looking back after that. You know, I always felt that he had to clear the decks of us in order to give her enough attention.
It takes a lot to live with four people over and over for years and years, which is what we did. And we'd called each other every name under the sun. We'd got to blows. We'd been through the whole damn show. We knew where we were at. We still do. We'd been through the mill together for more than 10 years. You know. We've been through our therapy together many times, you know.
You know, and a lot of days, even with all the craziness, it really works still. Instead of working every day, it worked like 2 days a month. Yeah. You know, and there was still good days. It was still really close friends, you know. Then it would split off again into some madness.
You know, it was quite obvious that the Beatles became, you know, I mean, the thing that it started out being, it gave us a vehicle to be able to do so much when we were younger, and then we grew right through that. But it got to a point where it was stifling us. There was too much restriction. You know, it had to self-destruct.
It's easy after the fact, you know, people are always saying about Apple and the Beatles business. Why didn't you? Why didn't you? You sit in there with millions of dollars floating around and try and work it out. It's so easy after the fact to say, why didn't you?
You know, the thing with Apple was that we were great creators and we could do all of that, but we were nobody had half an idea about a budget. So, you know, what we were spending, I think, was more than what we were earning.
There was nobody managing Apple. It was going, you know, wasting away all this money. Nobody had any ability to be a business manager.
And so it was a question of who was going to do it, because I was doing it, but I was doing it on the basis that I'll do it until you find somebody who you want to do it, because I didn't want to do it, you know. And so that's why, you know, somebody like Alan Klein had the opportunity to come in and say he could do it, but so did a lot of other people.
Klein had been managing the Rolling Stones, and I believe Donovan. And John had met him, and he just came in one day and said, well, I'm going to get Klein to manage me. And that's what's happening.
And Alan was a human being the same as Brian was a human being. You know, I mean, it was the same thing with Brian in the early days. It was assessment, and I make a lot of mistakes character-wise, you know, but now and then I make a good one, you know.
The alternative to Klein, really, was possibly Lee Eastman, you know, but I'm not at all sure that, you know, Paul wanted Lee Eastman to be a manager in the sense that, you know, Brian Epstein had been a manager, or Alan Klein to be a manager in the sense of Brian Epstein being a manager.
I'd put forward Lee Eastman, Linda's dad, as a possible sort of lawyer and possibly someone to do. But they said, no, he'd be just too biased against you, for you and against us, which I could see.
Oh, yeah, well, we had great arguments with Paul. Well, the three of us felt, the three of us have gone this way, you know, why don't you?
So there it was, and that then was a 3-to-1 situation. And in the Beatles, if any one doesn't agree with the plan, it was always vetoed. It's very democratic that way. So the 3-to-1 thing was very awkward. And things would happen like, I remember being at Olympic Studio one evening, and we were supposed to be doing something on Abbey Road, I think. And the three guys showed up, we all showed up at the studio ready to record, and Alan Klein showed up as part of the party with his sort of henchman. And they said, you've got to sign a contract for Klein, he's got to take it to his board. I said, it's Friday night. No, he doesn't work on a Saturday. Anyway, Alan Klein's a law unto himself. He hasn't got a board he has to report to, you know. I said, don't worry. So we could easily do this on Monday. Let's do our session now. You're not going to push me into this, you know. They said, oh, you're stalling. They said he wants 15%, he wants 20%. I said, tell him he can have 15%. They said, you're stalling. And I said, no, I'm working for us. We're a big act. I remember the exact words, we're a big act. The Beatles, he'll take 15%. But for some strange reason, I think they were so intoxicated with him that they said, no, he's got to have 20% and he's got to report to his board tomorrow. You've got to sign now or never, kind of thing. I said, right, that's it. Well, I'm not signing now. So it was a big argument. And they all went, leaving me at the studio.
What changed at Apple after he arrived? Everything. It was a completely different situation, you know. Number one, right, first and foremost, Paul wasn't there.
At the end of Let It Be was such an unhappy record, really, even though there's some great songs on it. I really thought that was the end of the Beatles, and I thought I would never work with them again. I thought, what a shame to go out there like this. So I was quite surprised when Paul rang me up and said, we're going to make another record, would you like to produce it? And my immediate answer was, only if you let me produce it the way we used to. And he said, we do want to do that. I said, John included? He said, yes, honestly. So I said, well, if you really want to do that, let's do it, and let's get together again. And it was a very happy record. I guess it was happy because everybody knew it was going to be the last.
Well, I think the deal was that, you know, through Let It Be, it was like I left, and we got back on the basis that we've got to just finish it up, make it tidy. So I got back on that basis. Then everybody decided, well, we ought to do one better album.
I think it shows on the record that when we were excited, the track's exciting, you know. It's really, all comes together. It doesn't matter what we're going through as individuals, you know, on the bullshit level. When it gets to the music, you know, when you can see that it's really cool, we all put in 1,000%.
Nobody knew for sure it was going to be the last one, but everybody felt it was, you know. I think the Beatles have gone through so much, and it was a long time. They've been incarcerated with each other for nearly a decade, and it was a very, very happy album. Everybody worked frightfully well, and that's why I'm very fond of it.
There was always a possibility, though, you know, we could have carried on. We weren't sitting in the studio saying, okay, this is it. Last record, last track, last take. Yeah.
But I think at the point we'd finished Abbey Road, it was really, the game was up, you know, and I think we all accepted that.
Once there was a way to
get back home.
I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, come together right now over me.
Magical. I mean, there's some really loving, caring moments between four people. A hotel room here and there. A really amazing closeness. Just four guys who really loved each other. It was pretty sensational.
You know, they gave their money and they gave their screams, but the Beatles kind of gave their nervous systems, which is, you know, a much more difficult thing to give.
Well, I'm really glad that most of the songs dealt with love, peace, understanding. You know, it really did. If you look back, there's hardly anyone says, go on, kids, tell them all to sod off, leave your parents. It's all you need is love. Oh, John's give peace a chance. There's a very good spirit behind it all.
It's just natural. It's not a great disaster. People keep talking about it as if it's the end of the earth. It's only a rock group that split up. It's nothing important. You know, you have all the old records there if you want to reminisce.
And in the end, the love you take.
That's what they ask you. You go around the world on these tours, you know, and these sort of press conferences as well. Getting the Beatles back together again. They say, well, what are you talking about? You
Sure.
know, you couldn't. They said, well, how about Julian? I said, I feel sorry for him getting in the middle of all of that. You know? Or Sean or somebody, you know.
Sure.
Well, let me ask you it this way. Are you getting back together? No.
And yet, with Free as a Bird, we
did.
somehow did. Yeah.
And again, I'm sorry, you know. 1, 2, 3, 4.